Okay, hello everybody. It looks like everyone is joining. So if you just joined us from the waiting room, thank you for being with us today. I have muted everybody and you will remain muted. We're going to start this session with a moderated discussion. I'll ask all of our panelists some questions for the first 40 minutes or so, and this part is going to be recorded. At the end of the session for the last 20 minutes or so, at that point I'll turn off the recording and I'll allow all of the participants to unmute themselves if they have any questions or want to have a more interactive conversation with anybody on the panel. We will also be answering any further questions that you all have. If you want to type them into the chat box while we're talking, we can get to those at the end as well. So officially, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for this virtual career panel. This week we have the production technology staff of the Musco Center for the Arts, and they are going to be sharing with us all of the things that it takes behind the scenes at this really amazing presenting house that we have here on campus. So first, I'd just like to introduce everybody who's with us today. We have Shannon Bicknell, the Director of Production and Operations. We have Aaron Thompson, the Production Manager. We have Selyua Tang, who's the Audio Video Lead. Josh Modrell, who is our Lighting Lead. We have TJ Hodge, the Stage and Rigging Lead. And finally, we have Margot, who is the Operations Assistant and Stage Manager, and also a COPA alum. So without further ado, I want to dive into the very first question, and I would like to invite each of you to answer, just speak for a minute or two, to just tell us a little bit more about what your role is at the Musco Center and what your daily duties entail in that role. So we'll start, Shannon, with you.
Hi, I'm the Director of Production Operations. I oversee everything that happens on stage and sort of backstage in our building. It's really hard to say what a typical day is in any theater. We sort of all split our time between like regular business hours, office days when we're not doing shows, and then show days when we're running rehearsals or shows on stage. So for office days, I spend a lot of my time in meetings, talking to other people about the direction that we're moving in, and sitting in production meetings, figuring out the best way to put stuff on our stage. One duty that Aaron and I share is to sort of figure out how best to put other people's shows on our stage. So we help them figure out what our technical strengths and weaknesses are, what kind of people we have on staff, what kind of people are they bringing with the show, what kind of scenery are they bringing. So Aaron and I should sort of split duties for figuring that out. I also ultimately approve all the budgets for production and operations. So that's the equipment and rentals that we need to spend, and then also all the show budgets, so what it's going to cost to put stuff on stage. Technicians belong to the IATSE Local 504, so all of those folks eventually report up to me. We've got about 20 stage technicians on our list, and also all of the operations folks eventually report up to me as well. So we have an operations manager and 3 operations assistants. On show days, Aaron and I also share duties for show days. So one of us is always in the building when stuff is happening on stage. And that is anybody's guess as to what might happen. So we greet the artists when they arrive, and we sort of deal with any issues that might come up. We're sort of like free roamers, whereas a lot of these other people have show duties that keep them stuck on stage. So we handle any emergencies that come up or any questions that anybody has.
Great, thank you, Shannon. So Aaron, we'll go to you next then. Could you tell us a little bit more about your role and how it's distinct from Shannon's and what your daily duties are?
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of overlap with Shannon. I communicate with incoming artists and companies, make sure that we're on the same page, that we meet, have mutually agreeable schedules, and that we can do what they need on the technical side, or that they can modify so that they can fit in our house. I also, one thing that is very distinct from Shannon is I'm in charge of all of the rentals that Musco Center does. We're available to rent for nonprofits. So that's a pretty decent chunk of my time as well. I also oversee the 3 department heads, Josh, Sohoy, and TJ. And along with them, that includes overseeing our stage crew. We've got about 20 on staff. We only see about 10 of them regularly. And also, like Shannon, we have 2 basic kinds of days, show days and regular days. On a show day, we're just running around, making sure that everything's in order. And then hopefully we have a chance to sit at our desks when the show starts and eat, usually for the first time that day. On a show day, that's when the show starts. That's usually when we can like actually look at our email, for example, for non-emergency show related things. And then regular days are just phone calls, meetings, labor estimates, and more meetings and emails.
Great, thank you, Aaron. Okay, so I'm going to go to Sohoy next. Could you tell us what your role entails as audio and video lead?
Yeah, so my job basically is to make sure everything in-house audio video works, like all of our backstage monitors, all of our speakers inside the theater, all of our onstage stuff. What else? We work with artists a lot when they get into the facility to make sure we can provide everything they want and need. There's always special requests when they come in that we don't know about, and that it just comes up. So we always work with them to handle that. I also handled renting of equipment like backline audio and video equipment. Yeah, and I work with other in-house staff to meet their needs. So like there may be little things that need changing, like the video monitors in the lobby, stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, I think the most fun part about our job is to also look for new equipment that we can purchase and obtain. That's always fun. A typical day, like Aaron and Shannon mentioned, show days are I think my best days, because that's when we actually that's our point of our work at the Musco Center for show days, to me. And yeah, and those days are always they're typical when we have like normal duties, but there's always changes and there's always things that pop up that we always have to divert our paths in setting things up or doing stuff.
Great,
yeah.
Thank you so much, Sohoy. Okay, TJ, I'm going to go to you next. Could you tell us what your role entails as a stage and rigging lead, and also explain what rigging means for those who are unfamiliar with that term?
Sure, yeah. Well, rigging basically involves all of the hardware and materials that it takes to safely hang a show within our theater. So we'd have line sets of a number of battens that run from up to down stage. That'll hang anything from lighting to set designs, microphones, whatever the show needs. But in my role at the Musco Center, I basically oversee everything that occurs at the stage level. I work real closely with Sohoy and Josh to execute and coordinate basically the needs that whatever the production is, whatever and what they need, whatever when they come through the door. I oversee and coordinate everything that falls within the rigging department, making sure this is just safe for the technicians and the performers as well. Typical day, well, there is no such thing as that, which is why I love working in live entertainment. They all bring very different needs, different forms of entertainment and shows. But typically, we'll work closely with whatever the technical needs are of a show. And I'll personally work directly with a show's production manager, all the way down to our own front of house team to give the official GO to start the show.
Great, thank you so much. And Josh, we'll go to you next. Tell us more about what your role is as lighting lead.
Yeah, so my name is Josh, and I'm master electrician and head of lighting. And as all of my colleagues have said, there really is no such thing as a typical day with what we do. So for me, a typical office day for me might be advancing the lighting requirements for a show or taking care of like Vectorworks drafting. So a light plot, a section, a stage setup, something like that, paperwork. So keeping track of what the lights are doing, where they go, where they hang, what color they are, what gobo they are, all of that. A show day for me is, it depends on the show. If it's a small show, I might be the light board operator for the symphony, where I'm just turning house lights and stage lights on and off. If it's one of our bigger dance or theater shows, for me, that's supervising the hang of the light plot, the focus of the light plot, and then making sure the show gets programmed and notes are taken care of and the show goes well. So yeah, that's who I am.
Great, thank you so much.
Emma, can I also add that Josh is our shop steward, our union shop steward. So he is also the liaison between our union technicians and the union.
Perfect, thank you for adding that in. Perhaps we'll get back to that in the Q&A to learn more about the union aspects of these roles as well. And now I want to bring it to Margot. You've had a couple of roles at the Musco Center, so could you tell us about both of those?
Yeah, so right now my main job at Musco is operations assistant. I actually started it right before the building closed, like about a week before. So I haven't really had a typical day yet. Right now what I'm doing is mostly just special projects for Aaron and Shannon. I did some research and now I'm putting together a bit of a photo thing, for lack of a better term. So me and the other operations assistants work on those. As a stage manager, I'm a freelance stage manager, so I was hired onto 2 shows at Musco this year, Chapman Celebrates and 9 to 5. And for those, I just basically oversaw the show from rehearsals through tech and to performances. And like everyone said, there's no 2 days that are the same for that because it's such a short process. But so for rehearsals, it's managing, for Chapman Celebrates, it was managing multiple rooms. For 9 to 5, it was making sure everyone is in the room at the right time, at the same time. And then once we moved into Musco, it was working with basically everybody on this chat right now, making sure that we can put together a show and kind of coordinating communication between them and the director, working with production managers and actors, technicians, all the above, making sure a show happens efficiently and safely, maintaining the artistic vision of the show, and putting out fires as they come up, metaphorically and literally sometimes. But yeah, it's just different every day.
Great, thank you. So I'm actually going to throw a new question in here that I didn't necessarily tell you all I was going to ask, but since you're all discussing how there really isn't a typical day, I'd love for any of you to jump in and explain a little bit more about what makes Musco Center distinct as a presenting house and how your role here might differ from a similar role at a producing house or even in film.
That's a really good question. So as a presenting house, we don't usually put together our own shows. So we're really just taking shows that are already built and putting them on our stage. There are a couple of exceptions in our season. We usually do like an anniversary show every year on the anniversary of the opening that is self-produced. And then we've also done SoCal Christmas, which is a self-produced show. So those shows we build from the beginning. We hire the designers or the directors or the talent, and our executive director helps sort of say what those shows are going to be. But for almost all of the work that we do, we basically either we pay the show or the show pays us, depending on what's more desirable. So we do rentals and then we do presented work. So the rentals pay us to be on our stage. The presented work, we pay them. We spend about 30% of our time on our presented season, and then we spend about 30% of our time on COPA. So we spend a good chunk of our time working with our colleagues over in COPA, Mark's team and Giulio, Peter Westenhofer, those folks, to figure out how to put COPA shows on our stage. What did I say? 30%, 30%, and then the rest of the time is spent on rentals and then university events. We do all of the big orientation stuff on our stage, and then we have done some graduations in the past. We'll see how that continues into the future. And then we also do like the economic forecast, the president's state of the university. Anytime there's like a big university event, it usually goes on our stage. I don't know about film though. I don't have any experience with film. Maybe somebody else can answer that question.
No, that's okay, no worries. Thank you for adding that clarifying information, Shannon, I appreciate it. Okay, so back to the regularly scheduled programming. So my next question is if each of you could share a little bit about your background and what steps you've taken in your career path to get to the position you're in now. So we'll start at the top again and we'll go back to you, Shannon.
Oh, good. I grew up acting, so I think that when you talk to a lot of these folks, you'll sort of see that like there's like a performer side you can come up on, or you can come up on the technical side. So I grew up doing school plays and musicals and things like that. My undergraduate degree is in English. After college, I did a lot of weird theater in LA. So like super weird, just like stuff in an empty warehouse where people are wearing masks and like rolling around on the ground.
And really weird, freaky puppets.
Yeah, with puppets and stuff. So I was on stage and eventually backstage for that kind of stuff. I dislocated my knee while I was puppeteering in a show, and the stage manager had also quit. So I was like, how hard could it be? And that's the first show that I stage managed professionally, because I was like, I already blocked out all of these dates. And I really liked it. I was like, wow, I'm way better at stage managing than I ever was at being a performer. So I decided to go back to grad school. I got my graduate degree in stage management from UC Irvine. And I worked at UCI as a little bit as a production manager, assistant production manager, and then I started at Chapman in 2017, right after the Musco opened.
Great, thank you, Shannon. Okay, Erin, I'm gonna take it to you next. Could you tell us about your background?
Yeah, I went to OSHA. I am a production design graduate, so I have been backstage since high school. My ballet career was tragically cut short by being fat. So after I graduated from OSHA, I went and worked at my local video store for a while because those were still a thing when I was a youth. So I was there for about 6 months, and then I was tipped off to an opening at Segerstrom Center for the Arts. They have a non-union casual crew that does setups in mostly Samuele Theater and the lobbies. We ran all of the spaces that the union didn't run in that house. So after 10 years of being the crew lead for that team, I needed a change of scenery because things were just the same all the time. Musco Center at that time was almost done, and a former colleague of mine from Segerstrom had jumped from there to be the senior director here at Musco Center. So I gave Dave a call and said, please, sir, may I have a job? And he said, fine, I guess. So I secured a spot on the stage crew here at Musco Center. Like I said, right before we opened, for the first solid chunk of time that I was here, we had to be in hard hats when we were in the building. There was only one functional restroom in the whole building. You couldn't drink from the water fountains or from the tap. Not because they didn't work, but because we were told that you should not drink from them. So once I was at Musco Center, I started to help out up at Stage Door, which is like, generally it's the backstage entrance where artists go. For us, it's also our main reception area and entrance to the offices. I took on some more administrative and like coordination responsibilities there. And around then, rentals were pawned off on me also. So that's sort of when I started being in charge of those. Eventually, I was promoted to production coordinator for reels, and then assistant production manager, and then production manager. And after letting myself sort of languish in a really comfortable, relatively low responsibility job at Segerstrom, it's been pretty challenging for me here. I have been taking on more responsibility faster than I was really comfortable with. Luckily, my boss, Shannon, and my crew are all really supportive and tolerant.
Great, thank you, Erin. Okay, so Hoy, I'm gonna go to you next. Could you tell us about what steps you've taken to get to where you are now?
Yeah, so I started doing AV work in high school, really liked it. And then for college, I went to CSUN, Cal State Northridge. We do student orientations there also. And in a part of that, we had to see a show. And it was a pretty cool theater production. I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. I really liked the lighting of it, the way it sounded, everything. So I was like, man, I should do this. So I signed up as a student assistant in that theater, worked there pretty much throughout my college career, about 5 years. When I graduated, I went to school and I got a sociology degree. After I graduated, one of our clients at that theater gave me a job at his rehearsal studio in North Hollywood. So I worked there for a while. That place was pretty awesome. We catered to bands that were rehearsing to go out on tour. We had a lot of giant rooms and a lot of really cool clientele. So I liked that because we learned new gear, saw a whole bunch of people. So I was there for 3 years and I went back to CSUN as a staff member to work at the theater I was a student assistant at. And during that time, we actually built a newer theater, 1,700 seat theater. Yeah, and then opening came up at Chapman. That was what, 4.5 years ago. I applied for that and now I'm here.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, Josh, I'm gonna go to you next. Could you tell us what steps you've taken to get to where you are?
Yeah, so my undergraduate degrees are in marketing and finance, so completely unrelated to this. But when I was a student, I needed a work-study job, and I didn't really know what to do. I didn't really know where to go. Nothing really jumped out at me, but the theater department needed a carpenter in their scene shop, and my parents owned several construction companies, and I worked with them as a kid. So I figured I don't know anything about theater, but I do know how to build things. So I worked for the theater department for about a year, and then there was another larger performing arts facility on campus, which did a lot of like tours and a lot of like what we do at Musco Center. So a little bit student related, a little bit tours. So I jumped over there and became friends with the technical director, who was also a lighting designer. And I said, hey, I like you. I want to hang out with you. Tell me about lighting. So I did that and I graduated, and I sort of knew from the time I graduated that I wanted a house job. So that's what I was looking at from the beginning. And about 6 months later, I took a job up in Denver, Colorado, and worked there for about 5 years. And we did a lot of our own productions, and I was a lightboard programmer and sort of assistant technical director. And then it was time for a change. So I found this job at Chapman and applied, and here I am.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Okay, TJ, I'm going to you next. Could you tell us about your background?
Yeah, got my kick starting at the high school theater, and had really a really great role model as a stage manager there. He really showed me how much fun could be had working in a theater environment specifically. He had also gone on tours with rock bands and whatnot, so he was pretty varied in all forms of live entertainment. But hearing his stories and just his approach to work was really cool to see, and was pretty impactful at my age at the time. In college, I studied film and electronic arts, staying within the realm, just maybe a different subdivision of it. But I kept finding myself going back to live entertainment, and was lucky enough to work in all types of different venues, from small theaters around LA to major arenas, stadiums, convention centers, and also film studios. They each kind of brought their own different challenges and required a little bit of different skill sets. So I kind of focused on digging into each department in each of those venues, which provided a nice, strong learning foundation for me. I found that working in the rigging department kind of kept me in constant communication with all of the technical departments throughout each show, and I really enjoyed having that role in production and providing that kind of reliable foundation for a given show. But yeah, and then now I've found myself at a single theater consistently, which is nice to have a home, as Josh said, and it's been a great experience.
Great, thanks so much. And Margot, we will go to you next. So tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so like a lot of other people, I started theater in high school. I sucked at acting and I couldn't memorize lines, so I became a stage manager. No, I just saw someone was in charge and I wanted that job. So I started doing that when I was 14 or 15, and then I had my first professional show when I was 15 at Portland Playhouse in Oregon. And so I went to Chapman for a BA in theater tech. I came in wanting to do lighting and stage management, but I kind of fell into the niche of stage management and had a really fantastic career at Chapman. And I got to be one of the few students who was on the Musco Center grand opening. I think my job for that was stage management intern, because I just emailed Dave Leavenworth, and I just annoyed him until he gave me a job, which is my MO kind of. And
that sounds like a really common theme amongst all of us.
Yeah. That's the only way to get a job in this industry.
Yeah.
You guys would know that. But so I got in as a stage management assistant or intern, and did the grand opening, and then they gave me some responsibility for community day. I can't really remember what. I just remember running around with a bunch of walkie-talkies. And then eventually I was an assistant stage technician. I'm not really sure what I did besides coiling some cables sometimes. And then eventually students weren't really supposed to be on stage for whatever reason. And so then I ended up working at Stage Door with Aaron. And then I got to know Shannon and Aaron and everybody really well. And then I graduated college, went back to Portland and worked, well, I'm in Portland right now, so I worked here for about a year doing freelance stage management, production assistant, tech work, like working 60-hour weeks doing that plus barista work. So it was a long year, but then last January, I got an interview to work at Disney. And at first I didn't get the job. And then a few months later, they called me like, hey, you want to come and work here? So I came back to California, and I started working at Frozen. And then the hours weren't great. So I actually was in a meeting with Emma, and I ran into Dean Ongaro, and he's like, oh, you're back. Do you want to stage manage Chapman Celebrates? I'm like, I need money, and yes. And I missed the building a lot and the people in it. So I got to come back. And then I think it was during Chapman Celebrates that Shannon pulled me into her office and said, hey, we have this job coming up. Would you potentially be interested? And I said, of course. So I applied, and met Cecil, who's the operations manager. Then I stage managed 9 to 5, and then I started working as an operations assistant, which, just getting to work with the same team has been really awesome. I've really enjoyed stage managing in Musco. It's such a beautiful space. Like, who my age gets to stage manage in a 1,000-seat theater? Like, it's so special. So with a really great team. So that is my career.
That's great. Thank you, Margot. And I just wanted to insert real quick, you could call it annoying people, but I think what I'm hearing from all of these stories is that everyone's really great at leveraging their network. And that seems really, really key in this part of the industry, it seems. So I think maybe you could elaborate on some of that in my next question, because I'd like to hear from each of you what skills are most important in the role that you currently have. And I'm also interested in hearing about hard skills and soft skills. So if there are certain certifications that people might need, certain training or union memberships, then I'd love to hear about that. So we'll go back to the top with Shannon again.
I think, so if you, like I said, my background is so my MFA is in stage management. And if you want to be a stage manager, you have to be super organized, bossy. Yeah. Well, I think that there's definitely a trick that the best stage managers learn of how to be in control of a room without being overbearing. And I do think that a lot of times people think that stage management is all about paperwork, but paperwork is just a tool to communicate. So you have to be a really good communicator. And part of that is being able to communicate with paperwork, with putting together stuff that makes sense for other people. In my current job, the thing that I do the most is be the boss. I think that in order to be a good manager, I really see myself as in service to this team. So it's my job to help them get the tools that they need to do the best job that they can do. So that means like clearing the way for them bureaucratically, making sure that they have access to the resources that they need, making sure they have the information that they need to do the best job that they can. I think it's really important in any job to be kind, which I think is totally different from being nice, because I'm not always that nice, but I do try to be kind and have empathy for the people around me. I think that's especially important in our job, because we're dealing with so many different kinds of people, and occasionally you come across people who are not that pleasant to work with. And I think it's especially important to have empathy for those people and just know that everybody just wants to put on the best possible show. Like, we're all actually pulling in the same direction. And so being able to compromise and see things from other people's point of view, I think is super duper important. We have a no jerks rule on our team. So it's when I interview people, I will not hire someone who's a jerk because I don't want to work with people who are jerks. So that's something that is really important to me on my team. We spend so much time together, even more now. I see these people in little boxes for so many hours a day, but even before we were where we are now, we would work together for, 12, 14, 16-hour days. So it's so important that we can communicate effectively and treat each other with respect. And I also think that if you're gonna work in this industry, you have to love it. If you don't love it, please go do something else, because there are so many hard days, and it takes a long time to sort of break in. You have to do, unless you're really lucky. I know I spent a lot of years doing stuff for free, like I said, in like dirty warehouses. And some days I'm talking with Daniele Strupa about like his presentation, and some days I'm buying chicken in a grocery store for an artist. Like, those are literally two things that I have done on the same day. So if you don't love what you're doing, I don't think it's true for every job that you have to love it, but I do think it's true for this job. You have to really love it.
Great, thanks so much for that, Shannon. Okay, Erin, I'm gonna come to you next. What hard and soft skills are necessary in your role?
A lot of what is like really necessary for my job is soft skills. The hard skills are like I have some of them in my background, but they don't see a lot of use. The hard skills are the three department heads who I rely on desperately all the time to use their hard skills to make the rest of us look good. But for me, there's a lot of like being diplomatic. A huge amount of what we do hinges on interpersonal skills. We spend a lot of time working out issues with very passionate people. We need to figure out who really needs what and when, and if we can accommodate that or not. This applies to visiting artisan companies, COPA, other university departments, and just ourselves as well. And part of that is hugely valuable to be able to lead somebody to a conclusion that you want them to arrive at without just telling them that that's where you want them to land. I think a healthy dose of patience is really, really handy. Because I do the rentals, I spend a lot of time explaining fairly technical things to people that don't necessarily share the language or the jargon or even have any experience in doing live performance. So that is super, super helpful. For the hardest portion of the job, planning and scheduling is really essential. Estimating how much time a given activity is going to take, like either a meeting or a load-in time, or how much time does Josh say he needs to load in the light plot versus how much time is physically available in the day, and how hard to push on the scheduling side and how hard to push on like the day of, how hard to push the team. And like planning out order of operations, knowing when a plan is not viable anymore and cutting your losses and moving on. That is hard. So I guess another really important thing is being able to let go of things, even things that you believe you are correct in. But it's really easy to get attached to an idea that you had, but that you have to, for one reason or another, drop. Knowing when to stand your ground or to back off is also a very difficult soft skill to master. I don't know anybody that really has mastered that. I certainly put up fights over stupid things all the time. I can't help it. And humility goes along with that. Like I don't know everything as much as people wish that I did or assume that I do. And I am wrong all the time, and I cop to it. And that's hard for a lot of people, but I am great at humility. Just ask anybody. I'm the best at humility. I don't know, that's what I got.
Great, thank you so much for that, Erin. Okay, I'm going to move to Sahoy next. So let us know what kinds of hard and soft skills are important in your role.
Yeah, just keeping up with the digital age and making sure I know what's up with the new equipment coming in and stuff like that. I think the most important soft skill is being able to listen and interpret people's needs, because they always want stuff done immediately. And no matter what time frame you get into them, it's always late. So those are my most important skills.
So, Hoy, do you want to say anything about what you've been doing this week? Have you learned any new skills?
Oh, yeah. These past few weeks, I've been learning video editing, streaming from home, a whole bunch of skills that I think we all have tried to learn throughout our stay-at-home orders. Yeah, but it's always fun learning new gear and new programs, and it always takes a lot more time than you think it will, that you plan out for.
I bet. Great, thank you, Sohoy. Okay, Josh, we'll go to you next. What kinds of skills are important in your role?
Perfect. I'm going to say, sort of as Sohoy said, the technology it's always changing, and it's really important to stay up on that. So it's important to understand the technology. And as far as lighting, that can be understanding like the rigging and the load distribution of lights. Some of our heaviest electrics weigh upwards of like 13 or 1400 pounds. So there's a lot of weight that hangs above people's heads. Power distribution is another thing. We deal, I guess, not as much as we used to with now that LEDs are becoming more mainstream, but generally theatrical productions require a large amount of power. So it's important to know how the power is distributed and who's accessing it and how much they're accessing it and all of that. Networking is big. Everything runs on networks these days. And I don't think you have to know much about networks, but you do have to understand the basics. You do have to understand your IP addresses and your subnet masks and just how to make things talk to each other. And then you have to understand the equipment. So for me, that might be getting a light plot from a group that we have coming in and knowing that we don't have the equipment that they're asking for, but we have equipment that could be substituted. So you sort of have to be aware of the equipment and how it's similar or dissimilar to other equipment. And then communication is super important. So, I mean, written communication is a big thing for me. Like with light plots, I believe Shannon said you've got to be able to like communicate your plan. So for me and lighting, that's in the light plot. This is how things get hung. This is where they get plugged in. Yeah, so that's that. And then Emma mentioned a little bit about like certifications and stuff. So the ETCP, which is the Entertainment Technician Certification Program, is a really big, important part of our industry. And it certifies essentially electricians and riggers. And that says that they know what they're doing. So what I like about the ETCP program and what I think is important is there's a lot of really good electricians and really good riggers who aren't certified, but how does a prospective employer know what their skills are? So there are shortcomings in the program, just like anything, but having a certification tells a prospective employer that you do have a minimum requisite amount of skill, at least, whereas without that certification, unless you've worked with that person before, it's really hard to verify that. So yeah, that's what's important for me.
Great, thank you for that insight, Josh. So TJ, we'll go to you next. What skills are important in your role?
Yeah, a hard skill that comes to mind that comes into play daily is being familiar with all the tools and hardware that you have at your disposal and how to properly use them to utilize and just to get the needs out of each department and what they need. Being able to forecast what they're trying to do and how they'll kind of interplay with each other is really important because it's all come together in the same place on stage at the same time. Soft skills, I jotted down 3 that came to my mind first. Being attentive, adaptable, and a problem solver. And basically just the sum of those skills means that you pretty much understand that everything can go wrong, will go wrong, and it'll go wrong at the worst possible time. So if you can walk in with that understanding, you'll be prepared to tackle pretty much anything that comes your way.
Great, thank you, TJ. And Margot, will go to you last to tell us about the skills you need in your area.
Yeah, for soft skills, I mean, Shannon, everyone kind of touched on this, but with stage management specifically, I think being an effective communicator is really important. Something else I've found that's really helpful for me is being a good translator. So something I've had to do a lot is translate some tech lingo to a director who has no experience with tech and making it make sense to them. They're like, why is this taking so long? I'm like, so I ask the technician tells me, I make it into something that makes sense for the director. And that's a really helpful skill for me. I think I'm able to do that because of my background in tech. I mean, there's a lot of stage managers come from a performance background, and I was more focused in tech in my career. So I think that's been really helpful thing for me to know. So just being able to communicate and speak the language of every person in the room. So like have that mile wide, inch deep, or whatever the phrase is. It's more like a 2 mile wide, half an inch deep. That being able to translate like that is really helpful. Also being a sponge, as a stage manager, you have to be the person in the room who's taking in everyone's stress and anxiety, and you cannot show it no matter how crummy you feel. That is, I think, something that's really important to know, having really thick skin, because I mean, stuff hits the fan and you have to just deal with it, and people getting angry and dealing with other people's emotions while managing your own is really important to be able to do. Hard skills wise, I mean, like I said, I think knowing your tech is really important. I personally like really enjoy using QLab, and that actually got me a lot of jobs in Portland in the smaller theaters. They're like, oh, you're a stage manager who knows how to program in ETC Nomad and can do QLab, do everything for us for $12 an hour, but that gets you good connections for the rest of your career. Aaron, I see you yet laughing at me. But I think those are important skills. For ops assistants, knowing PowerPoint has been really helpful this week. I think just being really adaptable with the technology you use. At Chapman, they have us use a software called Prepared. And, you know, it's not my first choice for a software, but having the patience to learn it and learn how to kind of deal with the ins and outs of it, I think that's been really helpful for me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. You all had such wonderful things to share there. So we've just got about 10 minutes left in the hour. So at this point, I'm going to conclude the recorded portion so we can move to the Q&A. And just a reminder to all of the students who registered for this event, I will be sending out the recording to you in the next day or two. So at this point, I'd just like to officially thank all of the panelists for joining us today, and we'll move on to the Q&A section next.